Welcome to the first video in a series where we're going to explore cybersecurity topics by installing, configuring, and securing a Linux virtual network. Please note that this is not meant to be a super secure network. This is just meant to help us learn how to apply concepts from cybersecurity that will reinforce and help us better understand these topics. So the goal of this first video is to just simply configure and set up the virtual network, install all the virtual machines, including a pfSense firewall, which won't be connecting to the internet. Also, we will be simulating traffic from the internet in certain ways. And we will demonstrate the connectivity between the different virtual machines. A couple of other notes about this virtual network. I'm doing this on VMware Workstation because that happens to be the virtualization software I use. Also, we're going to be using two different flavors of Linux in this video series, at least at the beginning. We're going to be using Fedora and Ubuntu, and I only chose those because I want a variety, not because there's any functional advantage of one over the other, just variety. So the first thing we're going to do is take a look at the network diagram just to see how the network's going to be set up and what our IP addresses are going to be. So what we can see right here is the network diagram for what we're going to be setting up in this video. Here we have the pfSense firewall router, and of course it's not going to be doing any routing over the internet. It's just going to be routing between our internal networks and some additional networks that simulate traffic from the internet. Right here we've got two different subnets, one labeled IT and one labeled employees. No real significant, just organizational differences, just a way of giving variety to the network, setting up for different scenarios. What's important is that we've given IT the subnet of 192.168.101/24, and employees gets 192.168.102/24. And of course, this is going to be their default gateway, and it's going to have an IP address per network interface of 192.101.1 and 102.1. So this is our network setup as it stands, and it will stand at the end of this video. And here we see the VMware Virtual Network Editor. This is what we want to do. We're going to add two networks, one for IT and one for employees. So here's what we do. We're going to go down here to add network, and we're going to use 15 and 16. No real significance, again, just matter of preference. So I'm going to add VMnet 15. And we are going to rename it to IT. Also, we want to make sure it's host only, and we want to remove local DHCP because we'll be using the pfSense firewall to distribute DHCP addresses. And of course, we want to change our subnet to 192.168.101.0. Subnet mask is good, and we can apply those settings. All right, so then we want to add our other network, which we're going to use VMnet 16 for that. And let's go ahead and rename this one to employee. Remove DHCP, make sure it's host only. And we're going to just change this octet right here to 102. Subnet mask is good. Apply settings, and we've got our virtual network set up. So now what we're going to do is move into creating those virtual machines. We're going to start with the pfSense firewall. So the first thing that you want to do is get a hold of the pfSense ISO, and you'll want to go to here to pfSense.org, download. Links will be in the description. Down here we got architecture. You want to select AMD 64-bit. And then you want your installer to be the DVD image ISO installer. Click download, save it wherever you want, and then you're going to need to extract the file somewhere where you can find it. Okay, so we've got our pfSense ISO. Next thing we want to do is create the virtual machine. So here in VMware Workstation Pro 17, go to create a new virtual machine, typical, and we're going to select the pfSense ISO that was extracted earlier. And we want to name this machine pfSense. We want to name this machine pfSense. And I've got a directory that I'm using for this particular network project. Requirements are just 4 gigabytes of disk space, and we'll go split virtual disk into multiple files. So here's where we want to customize our hardware. And for this machine, we want to have 1 gigabyte of memory. And we're going to set up 3 network adapters. One's going to be a dummy WAN adapter, and the other 2 are going to be our LAN adapters. There's most likely another way to configure it, but just for me, making it easy to understand, I just use the dummy WAN adapter and the 2 LAN adapters that we're going to use for the 2 local area networks, employees, and IT. So right here, also, we want to go ahead and remove these right here. We don't need a USB controller, and we don't need a sound card. So let's add a couple of network adapters. We'll just set this one to VMnet 1, and it'll just be our dummy WAN adapter. This right here is the one we're going to set to the IT network, which was VMnet 15. And this one we're going to set to the employee network, which is VMnet 16. So now we've got our network adapters set up. We've got our machine ready to install. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, and here we go. So now we've got pfSense installing, and it's going to move into its initial configuration screen, and from there we'll go ahead and get everything set up. All right, so here we want to go ahead and just go accept, install, guided on root ZFS, proceed with installation, no redundancy. Press spacebar here to select this disk for installing pfSense on. Go ahead and select yes, and from here it just extracts the files and installs everything. Really quick process. All right, and from here we're ready to reboot. All right, so now what we want to do here is go ahead and configure our interfaces, mainly so that the Ubuntu machine, the IT machine, can log in and configure this thing using the web interface. So we're just going to go ahead and set interface's IP address. So one thing we want to do here, let's get out of here. We want to make sure that the interface is correct. We want to make sure that that IT network is connected to LAN. So we'll go here to assign interfaces, and as you can see here, we've got EM1 has a MAC address of 05. So up here, what we can do is go to the settings and make sure that the IT network is the interface with that MAC address. So we go here to advanced, and as you can see, 05 is the last 2 numbers of this MAC address, which tells us that's what that interface is. So let's just get out of that, and we will set that IP address to the IP address of that subnet we picked. So we'll set interface to no, don't configure it via DHCP 192.168.101.1 subnet mask of 24. and no to that, no IPv6. And yes, we want to enable the DHCP server because it's what's going to be passing out addresses. And our start range is going to be 192.168.101.2. The end of that range, 192.168.101.100. And no, we want to keep it as HTTPS. So there we go. Now we can create an Ubuntu virtual machine that we'll use to configure the pfSense firewall from here on out. So there's that. And now we'll just get our Ubuntu virtual machine set up and finish with the firewall configuration. So here we are at the Ubuntu webpage. You can go to ubuntu.com, download desktop, and this is where we can get our Ubuntu ISO from. Down here, 22.04.4 LTS, that's when we're going to get. So you want to just download that, put it wherever you want, then you got your ISO. Then we'll be ready to create our virtual machine. Okay, so let's get cracking. Let's get this virtual machine installed. Create new virtual machine. Typical. Get that Ubuntu image that we just downloaded. We're going to call this one IT. Or actually, we're just going to go ahead and put in an initial user. I just created some random users for these machines with some standard naming conventions. For instance, this person's called Derek Ableton. And the usernames, well, we'll talk about the convention later. But there is a naming convention behind all of these usernames. As well as the passwords I'm using. And I won't really go into that right now. Okay. So that machine is going to be called IT. And we're going to put that in the Linux network project directory. Okay, keep defaults here. And we'll just go ahead and customize our hardware a little bit. Remove the sound card and remove the printer. And that's all we really need for this. Oh, and one other thing, yeah, we got to make sure that the network card is correct. So naturally, we want this to be the custom network we created for IT. And there we go. Network card's good to go. And then we'll just move into getting Ubuntu set up. All right, now here we are, ready to get this thing set up. All right, so keyboard layout, it's going to be English. Just do a minute. We'll just do a minimal, actually, do a normal installation. And then we want to erase disk and install Ubuntu. No problem. New York. And even though I already put the user, I'm just going to do this again. No big deal. Who am I? I'm Derek Ableton. DD. I'm going to call these, the machine names are going to be picked from like characters from Snow Crash. Book by Neil Stevenson. Username, Able 100 50750. Okay. Sure. All right, and then from here, it just installs the virtual machine. So we'll pick back up, and at that point, we'll be ready to configure pfSense via the Webconfigurator. I thought it might be useful to go ahead and install the Fedora machine in the background while Ubuntu's doing its thing. Doesn't really take long anyway, but so Fedora, we're going to use for the employee network, and you can go to fedoraproject.org workstation download. And here you just want to get the standard ISO. Here we go, Fedora Workstation 39. Download that to wherever you want to, and you'll be ready to go there. All right, so here we are. We're just going to go ahead and create our Fedora virtual machine. So pardon me, a typical. And we're going to use that installer that we just picked up. Going to call this one employee. Drop it in the special directory. Keep these defaults. And then we want to customize the hardware, number one, so that the network card is on a specific virtual network, employee. And we get rid of the sound card, get rid of the printer. And then we're good to go. All right, finish this. Now it's going to start Fedora. It's going to start the installation process. We'll go here, and we're going to just go up to Start Fedora Workstation Lab 39. And we'll just move on to the next part where we actually install Fedora. Because from here, it's just going to go on and on and on until we get to, hey, you want to install Fedora, And here we are at the installation screen. So let's just go ahead and install Fedora. All right, so just English keyboard. And here we want to go to installation destination and just say done. And that'll be good. And then just begin installation. It's that easy. So from here, we'll just move to the next parts where we have to provide any kind of user input. In the meantime, we see here that Ubuntu is still doing its thing. It's installing. You get a bunch of messages, but there's no real user input to deal with. Anyway, let's see how Fedora is doing. All right, Fedora is cleaning up. Ubuntu's cleaning up, and we'll get to the next part where we have to actually do something. Okay, so here we can see that Fedora has completed, and it's ready to, do its thing. And Ubuntu's wrapping up, so Ubuntu's what we're going to be really messing with. But let's just go ahead and finalize Fedora, so we'll finish installation here. But really, Fedora is pretty much finished installing, so we can just go ahead and shut it down. Okay, so here we go. We've got Ubuntu installed. The next thing is to get our machines in a state where they can communicate with each other. First thing to do is get the firewall configured. A couple of notes. Make sure that your pfSense machine is running. And from this point, the next thing we'll go to is where we're about to log into the pfSense. Okay, so Ubuntu's loaded. Here we are. We're going to log in with the first user here. All right. Now, the first thing we want to do is just skip all this. No, don't send system info. location services, and then we're done. First thing, let's demonstrate that we have an IP address. So we can go here, right click on the desktop and open the terminal. Let's do IPA. And we see here that we have our assigned IP address. So what this means is we can log into our pfSense firewall. Let's go ahead and open up Firefox here. Also note, you may need to restart the pfSense firewall. I've had to do that before. You'll try to log into the Webconfigurator and it doesn't let you log in. Just restart the firewall. So here we can go to HTTPS 192.168.101.1. And here you want to go to advanced, accept the risk and continue. Default credentials for the pfSense firewall are admin and pfSense. All right, so let's breeze through this installation. Next, host name. I'm going to go ahead and change this to Snow Crash. And domain, I'm just going to name this domain lytc.sec. Anyway, skip all this, override DNS. Just skip this right here. DHCP. And don't need to really worry about this right now. Let's go to next. LAN IP address, good. And then we'll just set the password. And for just right now, we'll just keep it what it is, just pfSense. All right, and then there you go. So now the firewall is set up. We can log into it, all that good stuff. The next step is to get the Fedora machine up and then ping from the Ubuntu machine to the Fedora machine. So where we'll pick up is, well, the next thing we're going to do is get Fedora up and running. So really, actually, the first thing we need to do here is set up the interfaces so the Fedora machine can connect to the network in the first place. So we've got here our screen. We've just freshly installed pfSense. And we are going to go ahead and set up our interfaces. And then we need to set up our DHCP server so that the Fedora machine gets an IP address in the first place. So we're going to go here to interfaces and assignments. This is obviously the card we set up for the employee network. So we're going to go ahead and add another interface, opt1, and we'll just save that. Now that interface is set up, so let's go ahead and we want to activate it, make sure it's up and running. We're going to enable interface, and it's also going to be DHCP. Or no, pardon me, it's going to be static IPv4. IP address is going to be what we gave the employee network, 192.168.102.1/24. All right, and we now have this interface active and running. And now we just want to set it up so that it actually gets an IP address. So we'll go over here to services, DHCP server, and we've got over here on opt1, enable DHCP server on opt1 interface. And we need to set up our pool, 192.168.102.2 and 192.168.102.100. That's our address pool. And scroll all the way down here and just save that. And then we'll apply changes. So now what we've got is the firewall is going to pass out an IP address to our Fedora machine when we get it up and running. So that brings us to the next step, which is to get the Fedora machine up and running. So that Fedora machine, we got it nice and installed and everything. We're going to go ahead and set this thing up. Just click on Finish Installation. My head's above it. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and reboot the machine. Okie dokie. First thing we want to do, just show that this thing is getting an IP address, because we got it set up with a network. And oh, yeah, of course we got to go past this. So just, forget about this. Just forget about that. But we're going to go ahead and set up a first user. And I've got a naming convention I use for all this. Feel free to use whatever you want. But for the purposes of this video series, I have a naming convention and a password convention, which I'll cover in users and passwords. But for now, I'm just going to put this stuff in. And well, Artur, username is going to be RTU8312. And just going to give them all right. Yep. All right. So let's go ahead and make sure we got an IP address. Of course, it should be in the subnet range that we assigned for this machine. Type IPA, check your IP address. There it is, 192.168.102.2. Now, we want these machines to have connectivity. So first thing we need to do, we got to go back to IT, which is where we're configuring the pfSense firewall. And we want to go to our interfaces and set upstream gateways so these things can actually route traffic to other networks. And the upstream gateway is just going to be the IP address of the network interface it's connected to. So here we go. That's it. All right. And then, of course, save. And we won't apply until we set this one. And the upstream gateway here is just going to be this IP address. There. And save that. And we'll go ahead and apply those changes. Now, after this, we need to set up firewall rules so that traffic is allowed outside of the network, or traffic is allowed to pass outside the network. And these things are stateful firewalls, so traffic will come back in if that IP address has initiated a conversation, initiated a connection. So here we go to firewalls. We want to go to rules. And LAN already gives you it already gives you a rule here that lets you communicate with other networks. So anything from this from any LAN subnet, or from LAN subnets, i.e. this interface, is going to get outside of the network. Now we want to go to opt1 and create another rule that's just like it. So all we need to set up here, don't really worry about this, but we do want to make sure the protocol is any, because we're going to be testing with ping. And we want the source to be from opt1 subnets. So you got those two things set, protocol any, opt1 subnets. You want to save that, and then you want to apply the changes. So now we've got traffic allowed from both interfaces. Crazy thing is, sometimes you'll have to reboot the firewall. I've seen it work. I've seen it where I can ping both machines without having to reboot the firewall. But anyway, I find that generally if I reboot the firewall and then reconnect the Ethernet adapters, they can both communicate with each other. The IP address for IT was actually, when the firewall came back up, it was actually 101.10. But, you know, one more time, as we can see here, we can ping the machine on the other network, and it can ping, the Fedora machine can ping the Ubuntu machine. So, woof. So what we have now is a Linux network with a pfSense firewall set up. And from there, we can do a lot of cool stuff. The next video, which will hit in about 3 weeks, will be about making users and groups. We're just exploring cybersecurity, and I look forward to seeing this video project through. So I'll see you, pals.